has to be done.
Welcome back to the Be Ruthless Show. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and joining me today is Jen Simonic, who has been knitting since she was 6 years old. Her grandmother taught her with steel needles from World War II used for bandage making. She was the weirdo that knit under the desk in 6th grade. A teacher and financial tech professional, Jen lives with her family in Seattle, Washington. They love her, even though her stash is taking over her house. Is it really?
I'm starting to be better about it, but yeah, there's a lot of yarn. Yarn comes in, yarn comes out. That's what happens.
6 years old.
Yeah, she showed me then, and then I wasn't very good at it, but I did do I made a lot of scarves. It's very calming. I have ADHD that was diagnosed very late in life by I'm a girl, so the way I figured it out is I figured it out myself. And I used to knit under the table at school because it was like a fidget spinner, and when I have my hands occupied, I can really focus a little bit better. And I've been called out in meetings and stuff like, why would you do that? You're not paying attention. But I really am paying attention. It helps me focus.
And did you do it all through life, or did you take a break?
There are times when I don't do it, and then you kind of know that there's a little bit of overwhelm going on. But when I come back to it, I remember why I love it. There's times where I don't do it, but I did it in college for a little bit. I wish I had done it more in college because I think it would have helped me more. I did it all through the pandemic. I picked it up again during the pandemic and was knitting under the Zoom line, just because it kept my hands busy and I could take notes. And then, I don't know. I guess the moral of the story is if you see somebody knitting in a meeting, they're not being disrespectful. They're just trying to pay attention, I think. Or maybe they are being disrespectful. I don't know. Maybe that's their thing. I'm not.
What you do is so beautiful. And I am certain people absolutely know about it, but so many people don't and need to. So please tell us.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you first of all, for having me on here. My organization that I'm a co-founder with Macy Kaplan, who's our executive director, and she's out in Maine. Our organization is called the Loose Ends Project. And what the Loose Ends Project does is we finish projects that have been left behind by somebody, by a family member, that are textile garments. And really the best way to say it is grandma, mom, uncle was making something for somebody, either knit, anything with thread, knit, quilting, cross stitch, and they couldn't finish it. Now and we finish it so it can go to that family member that it was meant for. And people in the knitting, crafting, yarn, fiber arts community get it because they're like, yeah, I'm going to have a lot of projects left behind and I want to make sure they get done. But talking to you and organizations that surround grief, there's people out there that don't always recognize that they have one of these objects or that they probably know they have it, but they don't know that anyone can do it. So that's what we do. We're there to help finish these projects for these crafters who've gone away.
Finding someone you trust to do something so important.
Yeah. It's amazing. Like, it's funny because when we started, people were like, how are you going to get people to do this for free? And I was like, I just don't. Have you met some crafters? They make everything. Like, they make hats for babies in NICUs. They make quilts for children in hospitals. They make hats for the homeless. That's a lot of them most of their crafting is charity crafting. So I really didn't think we were going to have trouble finding them. What we did have trouble with is finding the projects. So that's why we're talking to people like you, Sam.
I might get slapped virtually giving you another project, possibly. I had Jim's shirts made into a quilt.
Oh, how lovely. That so with those projects, we get some people who ask for that. And that's a harder thing to do because a lot of people um that takes a lot of effort, and that's an industry. People will do that for a job. So we have lists and lists of people who will do that, and we'll connect you with those people that will say this organization will do that and give people the names. But we don't normally do that. Um, but I have a friend who does it, and the one thing she has to say to people when they get all these clothes, baby clothes sometimes, you know, she will say, "You're not going to get any of these clothes back. You're going to get a quilt." And she really has to drive that home because to make it, you've got to rip things apart, and that can be, really that can be scary and sad. So, yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. We've been around about 2 years, and we started with just knitting and crocheting because that's what we knew. And then we added quilting because I have friends who were like, "Why aren't you doing quilting?" And we were like, "Well, we don't know enough about it. And we know it's a process. It's a big deal to quilt something." But there are quilters out there that really want to help. So we've got a lot of quilters. And so we do that too. And then we have groups that are like, "Hey, we want to do bobbin lace for you." And I'm like, "Well, okay, if we have a bobbin lace, we're ready to go." So, yeah, it's really been a whirlwind. It's been really, oh, like very affirming to know that people get it and understand why it's important. And I feel a little bit like a fraud because I haven't had anybody die. Like I've had people die in my family, but not my parent. My parents are still alive. My husband's still alive. My kids are still alive. Like, I haven't experienced grief, but I know I will at some point. You don't get out of life without experiencing it. So it's it's such a common experience for people, and it's 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 a privilege to be part of taking care of people when they need it.
And truly, the biggest fear is I am giving something that is so meaningful
Yeah.
to someone that, will I get it back in the way I hope? And
Yeah.
so people will come to me, and if I'm giving them a name, they know it's someone I trust. And so finding those people, if they come to you, you have only picked people that you trust. So that is taking that work off of their plates.
Yeah, and one of the things, well, usually when a crafter dies, they have many, many projects left behind. And most crafters know that. So when they sign up, they get excited about signing up. Um, they self they self report like, "Hey, I'm really good at knitting. I'm not great at crochet, and I'm this way at something else." But when we vet people for the projects, we send them an email, we send them a text. If we don't hear back from them, that person, I move on to the next one because I got to tell you, if you're not responding, that's the only real way you can get kicked out of loose ends. If you just don't respond, because communication is key to keep these things going. Um, there's a lot of times that we just got a request recently where something had been destroyed and somebody wanted it back to exactly the way it was before. That can't always happen. So we try to set expectations too. Our finishers are good, and sometimes they're really fast, but some of these projects take years. So making sure that they're communicating with the person who has it, and making sure that the project owner gets the immense amount of work that's being done, and is kind, because sometimes people in grief aren't kind, right? They're cranky. They're they're feeling hurt and sad. So it's our job to kind of be that conduit between those people. We we do the best we can to get the best person. And the nightmare is somebody losing something. And we have had one lost in the mail. That's why we only do projects close to each other. And if it has to go somewhere else, we get it certified, and we make sure we're learning every day. Nobody did this before. And that's not quite true. If you talk to any crafter, they're going to say that they did this before. They've done this fixing of something for someone. What's new about what we do is we're pretty much matchmakers for people who when their crafter in life passes away and they don't know who else to go to. Most people will go to yarn stores or quilt stores and be like, I have this. Can you do something? And when we talk to quilt and yarn stores, they're like, thank goodness you're here, because we don't always have somebody we can give it to, because we're usually doing like 3 or 4 at a time. So there's no guarantees in life, Samantha. I guess that's my, sometimes things happen to people. We just recently lost a project because the woman went on sick. Like, I tracked it down, but she had left her work information. And when I called work, she had a health emergency and was on sick leave. And I don't know what the health emergency was, but we got it back. We got what we needed, but it took some doing. So we learned more about that. So if you've got an email that's only a work email, I need all of the emails. And so I guess to say is, trust us with it, but you're also taking a little bit of a leap of faith in the goodness of others. And we've got a lot of examples where it's worked out beautifully. So, as with anything in life, it's you have to trust other people. And usually what I find is when you trust other people, things are good. People are good. I know it doesn't look like that right now. It's a little crazy out there right now. But people are just in general really good. And if you can remember that, you're going to have a much happier, healthier life. And turn off the TV. Just turn it off, I think. Especially.
And, I don't think people in the grieving space, because what would you do? I feel like I don't think people think to go to stores all the time. I hadn't heard of this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that others have done this before. And so I feel like there is a gap you're filling for people that didn't have anywhere to turn.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I was at the Madison Knitting Guild on Monday, which was lovely. And, we said, Macy asked, how many of you have finished a project for somebody whose loved one had died? Half the group had raised their hand, because it's just something you do. We used to do this in the synagogue and in the church and in the mount, like in these communities that we had before we became separated by Zoom and all these things. We used to do this for other people. A quilter would die, the quilting bee that they would happen with the quilting group that they used to be with. But we're also separated now. I live in Seattle, Washington. I grew up in New Jersey. Most of my family's still in New Jersey, but that's not normal. Like, a lot of people move to get to where they need to go. And you don't always make the same routes you have when your family's around them, when you're making your own family.
We were just talking about that things are so tied to Zoom and online right now. And it is overwhelming in this world. And when you go through loss, connecting with others who understand, connecting with people who can help, fulfill a project that hasn't been completed, or connect you with others who can maybe answer those questions in person. It's so different.
Yeah, it's a lot different. And that one of the things that we do when we match projects, I think people think that I'm sitting here on like a horde of projects and I'm doling them out slowly. And I'm not. Like, we'll do some press and 50 finishers will show up and be like, I want to be a finisher. And then 1 or 2 projects will show up, maybe 10. And then we'll get them out there. What happens is, like you said, people who don't craft or are in grief don't always know what to do with the stuff or know where it is. So we will take it. We want to do it. So what happens is somebody submits a project on our website, we look at it, and we try our best to match it as close as possible, because part of our mission is to build that community back up. We went while we were in Madison, we had a question and answer. One woman held up a package, and we called on her, and she had gone to loose ends. I think she read about us, gone to loose ends, submitted a project, and she said, and I didn't hear her the first time. She was like, so I submitted a project. I'm like, oh, in January, and it just got done. Yeah, sometimes these take a long time. She goes, no, 2 weeks ago. I submitted it 2 weeks ago, and this woman finished it, and she lives 3 blocks from me. And that's kind of the ideal. Like, we're going to find someone nearby. And she's like, and now I have another friend, which is kind of the point, right? We're building community, and it might not be somebody that you necessarily would have thought of as a friend before. There you might not know people if they're not in your community already directly, they might just go in different circles, but now they're in your circle. So it's that's one of the things that people don't think of, but this is what's happening behind the scenes, is that we of course match for the talent that you have. Like, hey, I'm an expert knitter, or hey, I'm a beginner crocheter, but this is a beginner crocheter project. B, location, I'm really close to you. And C, do you like doing this kind of project? I can do a beginner crochet project. I don't particularly enjoy it. So I have that on mine. Like, I'm not going to do any beginner crochet projects.
What qualifies someone as a beginner? There are people who dismiss talent.
Yeah.
Right. And you just said, I do this. It's therapeutic. It's calming.
Yeah.
How many people could be a part of this and are saying, I'm not talented?
Well, it's funny. It's so funny because I've been knitting for, gosh, over 40 years now, for being honest, almost 50 years now. I am still not an expert knitter. I am a intermediate knitter. I can read a pattern. I could probably do something without a pattern, but it would be hard for me, because you figure out the thing you like to do and you do it. And I have to say, a lot of people, we don't know. Like, people will say, I do this. If you're an expert in something, you can probably figure out something without a pattern, without the materials, and without knowing a lot. You could probably figure it out based on what someone was going for. And you're not working in a vacuum. We have a finisher group that helps answer questions. So we had this beautiful project that was like a Harlequin jacket, and we couldn't find the pattern for it. There was no pattern with it, but there's this group called on Ravelry. There's a website called Ravelry, which stores all these projects, and people keep notes about their projects on there. And some very good detectives in our group went and found the exact project that was being made. And we found out that we found the notes from the original crafter. Now, that took certain skills. Those skills are not necessarily transferable into, I can now knit this. So we had one person do this part, and we had another person say, I want to do that, but I want to do it justice. So I'm going to get some supplies, and I'm going to practice the pattern and the technique to make sure that I can do it correctly. I mean, that's the kind of things that happen. And so when you ask me what makes you an expert, what makes you a beginner, what makes you an intermediate, it's self rating. And I have had 70-year-old women who've been knitting for 6 years say, I'm a beginner. And you know what? I got to trust them that they're a beginner, because if I show them a washcloth pattern, they're going to be able to do it, because that might be the only thing that they do. And people know, like, I'll send them a project and they'll say to me, oh, Oh, yeah, I can't do that particular technique, but please ask me to do something else. And some other person I'll find will be like, that's exactly what I like to do. So I think, Samantha, the question to answer your question, which was how is somebody an advanced, intermediate, or beginner? Um, if you're not sure, downgrade yourself a little bit, but you can also, if you rank yourself as a beginner, that doesn't mean you're not going to get a project. Because here's the deal, not everybody who dies is an expert in their craft if they've left something behind. I had a wonderful project where this woman was like, my grandmother was an expert knitter. And I got the picture, and it was a crochet project. And it was a beginning crochet project where she was learning to make a grocery, like a market bag. And she had just like a couple of chains of crochet. Now, that doesn't mean it's not valuable to her. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't valuable enough for us to finish it. We finished it. We found a crocheter, and we're like, this is a little weird. It's more of a craft project. So they took the chain and they turned it into a letter for the person's name. They took the half finished bag and found some driftwood and hung the half finished bag off of there, made kind of a window box with the Woolworth pattern from 1965 that they put in there. And now this project owner has this lovely thing to remember I think it was her grandmother by. So that's the kind of thing that happens, and you can always say no. That's the other thing. Like if we send something to somebody and say, hey, can you do this? And they look at it, they can say, no, I can't do this. Or they can take it and be like, oh, I thought I could do this, but I'm really not the person for this. And they can give it back. And now they're part of the story. So
I just love this community so much. And what I see so often is when people grieve, they end up wanting to give back in some way. They end up wanting to help others. They end up wanting to volunteer, to do something. And so when I say, how or what do you enjoy doing? They look at me like I spoke Japanese.
because they don't enjoy anything right now because they're in grief, right?
Well, and because when we're kids, we'll try anything, and then we grow up and we start worrying about if we're good at it, and we have all of the noise of the world. And I'm part of this grief carnival next weekend coming up, and one of the things I'm working on is going back to forgetting about the noise and what might be fun, what do we enjoy. And I feel like there are so many people who might enjoy crafting and being a part of finishing and giving back, and they might not ever get past being a beginner. They might just enjoy the community and learning and volunteering and finger painting like I did at 3 a.m. when I couldn't sleep, and just part of healing.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, even if they never ever advance, never do a project, I just feel like this community, this experience, this learning and crafting, there's a way to say, I don't care if you're good, if this sounds like something you want to be a part of, is there a way to say, I don't even know if I'm a beginner, but I love how this sounds right now. Could I dip my feet in?
So it's a great question. And you got to have some facility at it. However, there's other things that you can do with our organization. You can tell people about it.
Mm-hmm.
You can go onto our website and you can grab the flyers that we have. You can go around and talk about it. You can, if you're a reporter, you can write about it. If you have a group of people that you're talking to, you can tell them about it. If you have technology skills and you want to help us, you can volunteer that way. If you are really good at organizing stuff, we could use help. There's lots of ways to help us. You can run a fundraiser for us. We have people who do bake sales for us and things like that. All of those, we'll never turn away help. Help is a very hard resource, and it feels good to help. So if you're a beginner at something, but you can finish it. So if you've done a chevron Afghan for crocheting, we could use your help. If there's lots of ways to help. And if you think of a way to help us that I haven't mentioned, I am open. Go to info@looseensproject.org and send me an email. I'm willing to listen. We went to a yarn store called the Sow's Ear, which I thought was a clever name for a yarn store. And they said, we have a newsletter. Is that too small? I was like, of course not. That's not too small to connect with a group of people who like yarn and want to, read what you have to say. We're always willing to talk to people. Now, the biggest problem we have, and in talking to your community, this might really be the help. We really need to work harder at getting to those projects, because since the beginning, it was easy to get craft people to sign up. It's harder to find those projects because not everybody knows what mom does. My kids know I knit, but there's other people out there that have told me, oh, like that story I just told you. My mom was an expert knitter. No, she was a crocheter. My mom used to do quilting. Well, what kind of quilting? I don't know, just quilting, right? There are so many people in the mainstream world, in the grief world of the sphere where you are, that could help us by getting the word out, and that's huge to us right now, because we have about 12 finishers for every one project. That's been consistent through. And we, in our groups where people, are waiting to hear about projects and helping each other, the biggest complaint is, I don't have a project. Well, you might never get one. And that's okay. And then when somebody says that, somebody will be like, that means someone died. And I'm like, okay, they can be excited about getting a project. And yeah, it might mean that someone died, or someone lost their vision, or someone lost their ability to craft, because we won't turn you away. We've had people say, I made a blanket for every single new kid, and I started this blanket for my nephew, but I can't work it anymore. We've had a lot of crafters lose their ability to craft through dementia. And that's a really long grieving process, because when someone has dementia or Alzheimer's, it's not always an easy, like, oh, they become this nice person who sits in a corner and smiles all the time. They lose a lot of their personality. And that grieving process is hard, because you're grieving them while they're right there. But we've seen some of these people who were crafters, and we've seen how that illness takes away their ability. There's some fascinating photos of a woman's handicraft of knitting at different months, or as her illness has progressed. And we just did a hook rug, not like a latch hook rug. We've done those too, but like a hook rug, which is a lost art, but it's one of these things that we do have some people who do it, where this artist, you could see the pattern kind of waver, and she kind of lost it. But the finisher who came to help her was able to talk to her about it and say, I would like to finish this for you. And she goes, oh, and they looked at it, and they could see what was being done. And she picked out a piece of thread from her clothing to put it around, and to kind of define where she started and the original crafter had stopped. And she actually got to enjoy that rug. That original crafter has it in her home, and she might not always remember that she was the one who made it, but it's there, and she can look at it and enjoy it. So it's, even if you're not a crafter, there's ways to spread the word about this, to let other people know it's there, which is important, I think, because it breaks my heart, but sometimes you're in Goodwill and you'll see half-finished projects that people just didn't know what to do with. They didn't know what to do. And I encourage people who are crafters to really assess what they have. I'm terrible at this, because I just want to start all the projects. And I came back from Wisconsin with like 3 more projects. I don't need any more projects. I don't need any more yarn. But that's what we do. It's our hobby. It's our love. but there are some things in my stuff that I'm never going to finish. And I should put a note there or get rid of it so that my future family, doesn't have to deal with it when I go. And it's a silly story, and I tell it all the time, but there's a crocheted bikini that I started making when I was 20. I know you'll be shocked to hear that is no longer something I'm going to wear. So why would I have anyone finish it? It would be terrible to finish it. If my daughter is like having a particularly snarky moment, she might be like, Mom always wanted to be buried in that. Can you finish it for us? And that would just be horrible.
It's true though. Like, we would not know
Yeah.
looking what to do, right? Like, we would know this is yarn, these are beads, but we wouldn't be able to translate anything else.
It's funny because when we first started going around, I went to an old, like, we knew that finding the projects was going to be tricky. And I went to a retirement community for memory care. And they were like, you can do a yarn class for everybody. And I was like, okay, that's not what this, okay. So I did it just so I could see what they had. And they had a box that somebody had donated. And in that box were some labels from somebody that they had made, so that anytime they made something, they could say this came from the hands of this person. I think her name was Ingrid. But there was a half-finished sweater in this charity box. And it's funny because sometimes you open up these boxes. Well, I don't open up the boxes, but somebody will send me pictures of something, and they'll be like, I think it's an Afghan. And I'll look at it and I'm like, actually, it looks like a couple of different projects. It looks like 4 Afghans, or it looks like a hat and a part of a sweater. But you wouldn't know. If you're not a knitter, you're not going to know. If you're not a crafter, you might not know. So that's one of the things we're finding, is that these craft bags go to the person who is going to finish. And the person who's going to finish is like, oh, I found multiple things here. And unfortunately, I think a lot of this speaks to the invisibility of this, because it's something that a lot of women do. And as women, the things that we do that we have to do don't always get recognized for the value that they have. I give a lot of baby blankets to people when they have babies. This is part of one of them. It takes a little bit of work. I have to sew them together. I have to put it together. I think the people I give it to appreciate it, but I don't know that they understand the amount of time it takes. So as I've aged, like if somebody's like, could you just make this sweater for me? I'm like, no, I will not. I will not make this sweater. The only person I gleefully make sweaters for is my son, because he wears them all the time. And he gets so excited when I give it. He's in college too, which is kind of crazy that he would even bother to wear something his mother made, but he will for now. We'll see. But I feel like a lot of this stuff, and through no fault of their own, I just think people aren't interested in what they don't do. So, and unfortunately, the fiber arts and knitting, they've been made smaller because it's something that women have always done.
I was doing a video before this, and I was talking about the fact that if we don't share things, people don't know right? Like, again, it's not that my story matters, but grief is invisible. And if I don't talk about it, people will not know, for all people grieving. Right. So why don't we discuss the fact that for all people, like, a scarf takes however long, a sweater takes, a blanket takes, because baby gifts, I guarantee, like, we got, my oldest niece is now almost 15, but the baby chair that was made for her, right? Everyone wanted. So not just her sister, but every friend,
we have that as in my family. We have a cradle that my grandfather made, and we write the name of the baby underneath it. And that's wanted and loved. I think that, I mean, when we get a project, a lot of times there's this law, like, hey, there's one person in the family that didn't get this. We had we had three. Um, we had a grandmother who had four grandchildren, and she made the first stocking, Christmas stocking, but the last three, she had all the materials, but she couldn't finish it, and so these kids didn't have a stocking, and we got them finished by three separate finishers. Um, and that kind of, they understood that this was something important, but um, I just don't. I think that's the big thing, is that we don't always know what other people are doing, and we don't always appreciate the work that other people are doing, and we don't always take the time to ask what people are doing. So,
So then again, and I agree, we need to ask the questions, we need to have the conversations. Until then,
mhm,
it's our responsibility, those of us who are the ones doing it, to say,
to
let
talk
me,
about it, to
yeah,
say this is what
let
we're
me tell
doing.
you the work that went into this, or let
Well,
me tell you, for my finishers, this took 8 hours, this took 14.
well, if you think of a pair of socks, like a common pair of socks that someone knits for you, took 30,000 stitches. That's 30,000. Put it in, put it over, knit it over. And then you gotta do things like, you gotta turn the heel, you gotta, like, it takes craft, it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes resources. I mean, I made this sweater, as you probably could tell. Um, it didn't take that long, but it was expensive, because nice yarn is expensive. So it's when someone makes you a handcrafted thing, it's not because they're trying to cheap out on you. It's because they thought you were worthy of something.
Right.
Um, it, it's funny. I mean, you deal with grief. There's a lot of guilt behind some of these objects, and the guilt is that a lot of people, when they're dying, are like, "You're going to finish this for me," and they'll hand the project over to somebody. And I can't tell you the number of times I heard, "Oh, I always thought I'd learn how to knit. I always thought I'd learn how to do." And life's too short for that. Life is way too short for that, because if you want to knit, have at it. I'll teach you how to knit. Like, I love knitting. I get joy from it. It's something that I can do with my restless hands. It's a fight against of the existence of ennui. It's like, oh, life is meaningless. I just took thread and I made it into something tangible. Don't tell me that we don't matter or exist. I just did this. I fought this. But if it's not your jam, if mom was a knitter and you're not, well, I'm here to say there's people who would love to finish that for you. And you don't have to carry that guilt around just because you didn't want to do it. My mom's a sewer. I'm not a sewer. It's a different skill set. It's something that I have never been able to wrap my head around it, because if I cut something wrong, I want to throw it away. And she could look at it differently. Like, if I'd make a stitch that's wrong, I can undo it, or I can work around it. Um, I just don't have that facility with sewing. So why should I take that guilt on? It's not useful or helpful to anybody. Um, so that's another thing that I feel like we fight against, is the person who's like, I should have done this for my mom. No, no, we'll help you. We'll help you do this. And we have finishers who have projects. So we have finishers who, they're finishing cross stitch projects, but they don't know how to do quilting. So they've put in a project to get done, which is lovely. It, you can't be good at everything, and that's okay. That's really okay. We're all doing our best.
People can share and let others know to send projects.
Yep.
What else? February is a big month.
February is a really big month for us, and thank you for saying that. We have a relationship with Joann's, which is a giant craft store. They have about 850 stores in the United States, and what they do for their charity, for their charities that they take care of, or that they partner with, is they have Roundup at the counter. So in February, If you go to a Joann fabric store, and they call it used to be Joann fabric because I'm old. It's just Joann's. You go to the counter, you buy something, and you ask them to round up at the counter for you. So if it was $1.98, say round up to the nearest dollar, we get 2 cents. And last year, they were able to raise $250,000 for us, which was amazing and allowed us to do this full time as work. We have 2.5 people who work for us, including me and Macy. And it gives us the time to get this done, talk about it, match people, just keep this alive. And I think it needs to be alive because I think it's affected a lot of people. So if you support our cause and you're crafty, you can go buy stuff to make, Taylor Swift bracelets at Joann's, or you could buy stuff to knit or crochet or, decoupage, all of those things. But thank you for letting me mention that, Samantha.
Yeah, no, it's huge. I will get my stuff for my retreats. There's so many people who they have more than just yarn.
They have more than just yarn. And for some people, it's their local yarn store. If you're in the middle of nowhere, and yarn stores are hard to keep up if you don't have a very dedicated community. So for some people, it's their only yarn store. And it's a craft store. So you can get anything there. I was in line with somebody and they were getting foam so that they could have a mattress pad to sleep on when they go camping. It's the place. And I think if you grew up when I did with a home economics major, Mom, it's like second nature. I'm just going to go there and take care of that and do it.
So I'll remind everyone in February. Anything else that we need to remind people listening about?
Yeah, we have a website. It's looseends.org. On that website, you can become a finisher. We always need finishers. Even if you don't get a project in your lifetime, it's good to be there to know that we can ask you for help if we have to. So it's not a big ask. Sometimes we have people who've done 4 projects, but we have a lot of people who haven't done any projects, and people have 1 project. So become a finisher, submit a project. If you've got a project, go to our website and submit the project. If you want to put up flyers, we have flyers in, I think, 25 languages right now. If you've got a language that's not up there, tell us. Maybe you can help us make that happen because we want this to be available for everybody. Print out the flyers, put them around, help us make more flyers. You can donate to us. We'll take cash donations through our website. The one thing we don't do is take stuff. We don't take materials. But because we know that that's something that people look for, especially when clearing out a crafter's life's work, we have places that take those things. I think we've got a place for at least every state in the union. So we've got at least one place for every state in the union, if not 4 or 5, some in Canada and some in Europe. So, and just reminders of where else would take that material. Because I know when you're giving away stuff, it's always hard to know where to go. So
that's amazing.
Go to our website. And if you've got tech experience and you want to help us, we have an app that we work with that my neighbor built for us, and it has all of our finishers in it, so we can match things effectively. We're trying to get our projects in there right now. Our projects are in spreadsheets, and it would be really, if you're a programmer or a product manager, we would love to talk to you. So those are other ways you can help.
Thank you so much for everything you do, for your time. Been knitting under there while we do this.
I have.
Total multitasker. And just being here with your busy world. So connect with Jen, connect with the Loose Ends Project. And until next time, everyone, always be ruthless.
Thank you. Thank you so much.